Welcome. My name is Bob Wilson. I'm Professor of Church History at Acadia Divinity College. And this is the third in our series of interviews with the Reverend Dr. Millard Cherry, former Dean of Theology at Acadia University, first Principal of Acadia Divinity College, and Professor of Theology in both of those institutions. Dr. Cherry, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
I wonder if we can pick up the theme where we sort of left off in our last interview as we talked about sort of the presidents I have known. Dr. Beveridge succeeded Dr. Kirkconnell, and you had sort of a difficult time in that transition to the university, but I know you remained very good friends. So would you tell us a little bit about Dr. Beveridge?
Yes, well, I worked very closely with Dr. Beveridge. I've already, in a previous interview, I told you that he was involved in the negotiations at the time the Divinity College was being established. I worked very closely with him then, but then as his Dean of Theology, I continued to work very closely with Dr. Beveridge. I've always admired Dr. Beveridge for the wonderful way he was able to resist internalizing and holding grudges. He might have had reason to give the Divinity College, for example, a great deal of difficulty, but we've never had a more supportive person connected with the board than Dr. Beveridge. Your listeners might like to know that the president of the university is, by virtue of his office, a member of the board of trustees of Acadia Divinity College. Dr. Beveridge was always very, very supportive of the college, always present at board meetings, always bending over backwards to help make whatever we were striving for possible, that kind of thing. I did appreciate very much his support in those early years. In fact, I don't think we could have brought it off if it hadn't been for his very conscientious support. He was a most valuable person in especially the first 3 years of the college. Dr. Beveridge was the kind of person that could see the value sometimes of changing his own positions. He, for example, it's no secret that when the college was established, that the Baptist denomination would have liked very much to have had Dr. Langley as the first principal of Acadia Divinity College. At that time, Dr. Beveridge thought that was not appropriate, that I should be named the principal. He gladly went along with Dr. Langley being associate principal. When it seemed to me that it was wise for me to resign, I went to Dr. Beveridge and talked to him and told him that I thought we had reached the point where Dr. Langley was the man we needed at Acadia Divinity College at that time as principal, and he supported his appointment. And the charter is written in such a way that without his support, no one can be named principal of Acadia Divinity College. At a later time, when the Divinity College wanted to recommend one of our leaders for an honorary doctorate, and Dr. Beveridge could have had real good reason for saying no because of good personal reasons, Dr. Beveridge supported his nomination. He's that kind of man. I think that you would be interested to know that when I went out to Perot to be pastor of the church, he and Mrs. Beveridge live in the community. Mrs. Beveridge is an active member of the church. Dr. Beveridge is an adherent of the church because his background is United Church, not Baptist, but very faithful in his attendance, very supportive. And Mrs. Beveridge was taught the beginner's class for 12 years in the church out there. So they both became very active in the church out there.
I wonder if we can move on, and I know that you have had a great love of books all of your life. What books have influenced you most?
Again, that one's a hard one to answer. I think you're asking the question, books apart from the Bible. I think that I'd go back to those books that were especially significant in my earlier development. when I got to seminary, I was introduced to the works of Emil Brunner, and his works influenced me a great deal. I got to know Karl Barth, for example, through Emil Brunner, and I still think that Karl Barth is better through Emil Brunner than he is on his own to some degree, because Brunner softened some of the rough edges of Karl Barth. So Brunner's writings did influence me a great deal as a young student preparing for the ministry, and also preparing, also doing graduate work. He had a great influence. Another person that influenced me a great, another scholar that influenced me a great deal in his writings was Oscar Kuhlmann. It was through him that I became interested in the earliest material in the New Testament, that material that's incorporated there as hymns and creeds and that sort of thing. His earliest Christian Confessions, for example, was a book that influenced me a great deal. It was his influence that really led to my interest in the hymn in Philippians 2:5 through 11, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not think being in the form of God," etc. It was the interest in that kind of material. That is probably an early Christian hymn that Paul quoted and incorporated in the second chapter of Philippians. It was the influence of Oscar Kuhlmann's writings that got me interested in that hymn and made me want to study that hymn, and that was the subject of my doctoral thesis. People are a little amazed that that could wind up being 335 pages, but and I would say today that 2/3 of it wasn't necessary, but it helped me get the degree anyway. So those are two of the scholars that, and of course, certainly the writings of Karl Barth influenced me a great deal. When I was getting my theological education, the Barthian movement was the most significant movement in Protestant theology. Some people know that I used to require Paul Tillich's systematic theology to be read, but he was not a formative theologian in my life. I had students to read him because at that time he would have been recognized as the leading Protestant theologian in North America. And I didn't think people should graduate from a theological school and not know anything about what Paul Tillich had written, whether they agreed with it or not. It would be comparable to asking a student in physics about Einstein, and they'd say, who is he? So, but he was not an influential theologian in my own development.
I know that you continue to read. What kind of things do you read in retirement?
I haven't ever been retired yet. I haven't been able to find out. Since I have, since I've been so-called retired, but been in the pastoral ministry again, I have been preaching from what is known as the common lectionary. Consequently, that has taken me back to the Bible, and I've done more serious Bible study in the last several years than I had done since I was a young person. So the biggest part of my reading has been reading in connection with my Bible study in preparation of sermons in recent years. Occasionally I get to read one of the journals, or I get to read a novel or something like that, but most of it in recent years has been in preparation for sermons, I must admit.
As you look back over your life and giving words of wisdom from this vista, what kinds of things would you say to a young pastor or theological student who's starting on his or her career?
I think that one of the things that I would emphasize is discipline. I have learned over the years, and I haven't found discipline easy. I was prone to procrastination myself, for one thing, plus the fact that as I was getting my education, I was working my way through, so you never had enough time for anything. Consequently, it was hard to develop a disciplined pattern and stick with it. But I've certainly learned through the years that the best way to get all of your work done is to be a disciplined person. For example, I have one day that I set aside each week, the same day each week, to write my sermon. Now, there would have been a time when I would have thought, well, I'm not ready today, and the next day would come and I wouldn't be ready, and I might wind up on Saturday still trying to write that sermon. But now, this year, Wednesday's the day. For years it was Thursday, but now it is Wednesday. So when Wednesday comes, I sit down and write that sermon, whether I'm ready to go to do it or not, because 11 o'clock is going to come on Sunday morning, whether you're ready or not. And I have been amazed at how much it helps to be a disciplined person. So I would advise young theologues to practice discipline and practice becoming a disciplined person. I know that they are caught up in the same tensions in which I have found myself. They're caught up in the demands of work, the demands of study, and the demands of often of family. And how you balance all of those, I do not know. I don't think it's really a matter of setting priorities the way that most people want to set priorities. I would say to them, seek to make the kingdom of God your first priority, and by that I mean the rule of God in your life, and then seek to let God rule in terms of your relationship to your family, in relationship to your study, and in relationship to your church work. It's not really a question of putting church before family or family before church, but it's seeking God's will in all these relations, because He wills for us to have all of them. So I think I would want to say that to them. In a very practical way, I'd want to emphasize how important it is, how important people are in pastoral ministry, loving people and being with people, hurting with people, rejoicing with people. I think that's extremely important. And I think I better stop because I can keep going on this one.
Dr. Cherry, you said in the first interview that you were a child of the Depression. What events and things that have happened in the broader world have you seen as being crucial to the modern world and crucial in your own life?
Well, certainly the Depression was one of those major events. My father and my grandmother, with whom we lived, when I was a baby, they moved on to her farm, and he ran her farm for her. They each had money in the bank when the Depression came. The bank closed, and they lost all the cash they had. We had to live on what little money that you could make on the farm. They sold 4 acres of tobacco one year for $100, which means that my grandmother got $50 and my father had $50, and that was their chief money income for the year. They were milking cows, and they had hens so they could sell eggs, so the cream and the eggs provided for the things that we could not produce on the farm that we had to buy for the table. We had very few clothes. Living in the country, all we needed was some clean overalls and denim shirts, and then we all had something that we could dress up in for Sunday. But we learned the value of money. My first day to work all day for somebody else, I think I was paid 50 cents. Later, I was paid the grand sum of $1 for a whole day's work on the farm. So I very early learned the value of money. It's hard for people to believe that cream was selling in those days for 3 cents a pound and that eggs were selling for 3 cents a dozen. Money was a very scarce article. Consequently, all my life I have saved money. My mother's family especially watched every penny, so I have come by that pretty naturally. So that has shaped my life. Like people of my generation, I've tried to have enough money saved up that I won't become a ward of the state, that kind of thing. I've also, this is not quite on your question, but I've had an ideal that eventually everything that I have been might somehow bring and everything I've done and might have and been able to earn might in some way bring glory and honor to God's name. Since I am a single person and do not have a family that I have to be concerned about when I die, that sort of thing, I would hope that if I have any estate left when I die, that it will go to the work of the Lord. I think I live by the same ideal as the people in other religious traditions who take vows of poverty and obedience, etc. And I think maybe all of that is shaped at least to some degree, by the respect that I had to have for money when I was a child. So certainly the Depression has been a very formative influence in my life. I've already mentioned what a formative influence the church was in my life, and still is to this day. I really don't know how I could survive without the fellowship of the church. That's the community to which I belong. That's my support community. The other events, of course, the Second World War was a tremendous, very traumatic experience for all of us, I think, who lived through it. I did not pass I was in officers training in college, but when I got beyond the first 2 years of basic training, I did not pass the physical exam for officers training, but I lost one of my dearest and best friends of college days in the war, and of course people that I knew from all around. Every day you picked up the paper, there was somebody else's name there. It was a terrible time to live through, and when I think what a terrible time it was for us here in North America, I can't even begin to conceive of what it must have been for the people who were living on the scene where the war was taking place. I'm thinking especially of the civilian populations in Europe and in Asia, and where the war was so fierce. That certainly was a very formative influence, more so than I realized, I think, in terms of great world events. Those are at least two of the things.
Over the years, you have had an opportunity to be part of the education of many students. What kind of things give you joy as you look at what some of those former students are doing?
Well, to begin with, I enjoyed the students a great deal while they were here and while I was with them, and continue to enjoy them whether they made great names for themselves or not. I really think we place entirely too much emphasis upon that kind of thing. But I do rejoice greatly in the accomplishment of my students. One of the things that thrills me most, for example, is to go hear one of my students preach in his or her own setting and realize that they're doing a much better job than I could ever do. It's a great thing to see the people with whom you've worked go beyond you and succeed far beyond anything that you could ever hope or dream of accomplishing. And I think that's one of the things that means so much to me.
Over the years, you have opened your house to students as well. Why don't you tell us why you have done that and how that has worked for you?
Well, as I was going through college and seminary, I was helped by people who believed in me and wanted to help me. I appreciated it very, very much. I remember one family with whom I lived for some 8 years, and the contribution that family made to my life. All but one of them is dead now. There's no way I can repay them. But it did dawn on me one day that one of the ways I could repay them was to open my home to students. I've had some wonderful young men to go through the university and live in my home while they've been going through university. I don't charge them anything. I just enjoy having them there. Now, they on the other hand are wonderful to me. They shovel my snow, and if they're around in the summertime, they mow my lawn, that kind of thing. They have their own quarters, so they don't have to live with me in the sense that they're underfoot or I'm under their foot. They have their privacy, but I've enjoyed them very, very much. I don't always have theological students, though. One of the persons that has lived with me was Glenn Berry. Some of your listeners would know Reverend Dr. Robert Berry. Glenn would be his youngest son. He was in psychology, and he's gone on to get his doctor's degree, and he's practicing here in the Valley at the present time. And the first student in recent years that I've had was Andrew Crowell. We all called him Andy. His father was the Reverend Seth Crowell. His brother Seth teaches at Atlantic Baptist College. Andy was a delight. He was also working in the local Baptist church at the time, so not only was I helping Andy, I hope, through university, I was also helping the local Baptist church because he was their student minister. Another student who's lived with me 8 years is Jeff White from the Middleton area. Jeff White came to major in biology, so his first years at Acadia were spent in biology. Then he decided to go into theology. Now, I did not call him into theology. When he first came, he said that he had an interest in theology, and I said, okay, Jeff, if you ever want to talk to me about that, you may do so, but I won't bring up the subject. People will say that you came to live with me, and I put you in theology, but I want you and I both to know that that was not the case. Excuse me. Jeff finished his degree in theology in 4 years, and now he's finishing up his 4th year in theology. So he's been living with me for 8 years. His brother Steve came along, and he majored in history and classics. I had him for 4 years. I really have enjoyed having the students. But in the years when I was teaching, my home was open into any number of students that were just coming and going. And also the cottage. I'm fortunate enough to have a shack out at Kingsport that I call my cottage. And I bought that not only for my sake, but especially for the sake of the Old School of Theology and then for the Divinity College. And for years, the faculty had its retreats there and that sort of thing. Theology Wives have had their retreats at the cottage, and until the student body got so big that it wouldn't accommodate them, they always gathered there for a retreat in the fall. Yes, I've had lots and lots of students and faculty to go through my home and my cottage together.
Over the years, you have also taken part in a lot of the university activities, and you explored some of that with us in the first interview. Is it true you have your special spot at basketball games and that they don't start unless you're there?
That's overstating it, but I do have a reserve seat, yes. I have reserve seats at basketball, football, and hockey, all three. From the very beginning, I have supported football and basketball at Acadia. There was a long period there that I had to face up the fact I couldn't do everything, so I gave up on hockey for a long time. Part of it was that I don't like being cold. And the old rink had no heat in it, and furthermore, there were posts everywhere, and it was hard to see. But now that we have this wonderful new facility, and I'm not quite as busy as I used to be, I also have season's tickets to the hockey games. And of course, in some ways, I waited till the right time because it's in more recent years that we've been having championship teams. So I enjoy all three of those sports a great deal. It was Dr. Beveridge that paid the tribute to me at one time that I was Acadia's '1 fan. I think really he deserves that credit, but I appreciated the honor just the same. I'm the old codger that used to take the cowbell to the games and ring it, you know.
Yeah. May I ask a question relating to the whole aspect of Christian witness? Do you see this then as part of your opportunity to witness in the community by being there and being part of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that Christians need to be seen and be known to be Christian when they're at places and involved in things. You know, there's a possibility that we might be viewed as so holy that we're no good or something like that. Well, I think it's important for us to be involved in the life of the community in which we find ourselves, and my basic community has been the university for the last 38 years. So, yeah, yes, I thought it was important both for the students and for the rest of the faculty to see that somebody in theology was interested in what was going on in the whole university.
I wonder, as we come to the end of this interview, whether there are some things we haven't talked about, a story that has been dear to you haven't had a chance to tell us in any of these connections?
Now you have asked a hard one. Somehow or another I didn't expect that one to happen. I have been so extremely happy in my relationships, both with the university and the School of Theology, and then with the Divinity College. I'm extremely grateful that I've had this opportunity. By the way, I never did intend to teach. I told you in an earlier interview I started out to get an earned doctorate because I wanted a rural church to have the very best prepared ministry that it could possibly get. I had no intention of teaching. When I got that invitation to come to Acadia, it was out of the blue. I had not sought it. I had never filled out any papers or anything. I did not expect to teach. But the opportunity presented itself, and I came. I came for 2 years. I've been here. I was here 36 or something like that while I was teaching, and I've been here now 39 years, and I became a Canadian citizen back in November the 12th, 1970. I'm proud to be a Canadian citizen. I'm more Canadian, I think, than many of the Canadians I know. I've always said the converted types are the worst kind, and I'm a converted type. I wonder what else I could say, and let me just say I wouldn't have missed it for anything in the world.
Well, Dr. Cherry, we're pleased that God brought you to Nova Scotia.
Thank you.
And you have played an integral role in the development of both the Acadia Divinity College and our whole denomination now for more than a generation. If we talk about generations, it's about 25 years. And you have helped to shape in so many ways, and I think very positively with your winsome spirit, a whole generation of preachers. And so we'd like to thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for coming to Canada.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.